Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kate Reinhard. My colleague Michelle Sanders and I will be presenting Nurturing the Nurturer Through Design. So this all started as an article that we wanted to write, over a year ago, pre-COVID. And we really got interested in this topic because we worked on several projects together where we've heard from clients and users that, oh, you don't need to make the staff spaces very nice. They're back of house, they really don't matter. And that was a little bit surprising to us because our healthcare providers are sort of at the front line of providing care to patients. And so we wanted to do a little more research to start making a case for nurturing the nurturer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Sanders. I'm a project architect and medical planner at the DC office for Perkins&Will. My interest and passion for healthcare started when I attended Savannah College of Art and Design with my thesis, which was a design for a post-traumatic stress disorder facility. The project created a spark for me for both healthcare research and how we integrate the research into our designs. I've also had personal experiences with my family circumstances where I spent many hours in different hospitals. The experience showed me the importance of advocating for patients as well as staff and how our designs can enable the best patient outcomes to better serve our community.
And I'm Kate Reinhardt again. I'm a project interior designer with Perkins&Will as well. I also went to the Savannah College of Art and Design, so Michelle and I have that in common. My interest in healthcare design came from undergraduate. I was studying art history, but I volunteered at the University of Michigan Hospital as an art cart volunteer. I went around from room to room, spent some time with the patients, and swapped out their posters for a new one, something that they could choose. Probably one of the only things that they had choice or control over. And I was really surprised how just a little tiny poster could really make a big difference in their care. And then I started to wonder, what would an entire building do? So in today's presentation, we will go through 5 different sections. We really wanted to start to frame the argument for nurturing the nurturer by looking at the hospital as a workplace. We typically see a hospital as a place where you go when you are sick, but we don't often think of it as a place of work. So we will build upon this idea in section 2, where we start to actually define who the nurturer is, what they go through on a daily basis, and also in today's pandemic. Staff burnout becomes a major driver in making the case for nurturing the nurturer because it does majorly impact the bottom line. And then from there in section 3, we really want to provide some tools and strategies for design being a game changer, looking at some examples from projects we've personally worked on and what we've worked on as a firm to start providing inspiring spaces for staff to work. In section 4, we will then talk about, at the end of the day, why should the healthcare organizations care? From a number standpoint, how much staff burnout is actually costing them, what's the tangible effect of this turnover? And then lastly, we will summarize by circling back to how nurturing the nurturer can ultimately improve patient care. So when researching this topic, we first wanted to ensure that the hospital is seen as a workplace, as I mentioned, not just a place where you go when you're sick. In today's pandemic state, a lot of us work in offices. We have the luxury of deciding whether or not to return to the workplace, what strategies are implementing, being able to address concerns of air quality and proximity to one another. But when the pandemic hit, healthcare providers really never stopped going to the office. It was absolutely kind of never a question. The pandemic started to reveal that the hospital setting really is a critical workplace that deserves the same and perhaps even greater attention to productivity, protection, comfort, efficiency, and overall employee satisfaction because it is such a difficult, stressful time, more so than previously. Healthcare professions, we learned, specifically nursing, are ranked 6th among the most stressful professions. We looked at multiple studies sort of framing our research, and we found that healthcare professionals are more prone to stress and occupational burnout, very understandably so because they're responsible for human lives. ICU staff, intensive care, for instance, are dealing with death on a daily basis, so this is a primary source of stress. And then on top of that, nurses are the ones that are, really connecting providers and patients, which means they're responsible for routine care before, during, and after treatment, not just someone who pops in and out. So when thinking about the topic of nurturing the nurturer, we wanted to be sure to clearly understand and define who the nurturer is. You all probably remember from school, early education, learning about this term nurture and that common alliterative expression, nature versus nurture. It's a concept where researchers consider nurture an essential role on nature. So if we agree that nurturing is a really critical factor in human outcome, should we not ensure that the one doing the nurturing is a critical game player who deserves the utmost care? In a workplace where PPE, protective equipment like masks and gowns and gloves, really have to be worn for job-related safety and health purposes, it then makes us ask, shouldn't the most basic layer of protective gear be the actual well-being of the nurturer?
As Kate mentioned, fears over their own safety and amount of equipment for our nurturers relate to workplace stress, and this equates to increased spending. Workplace stress can influence healthcare professionals' physical and emotional well-being by curbing efficiency and diminishing their overall quality of life, not to mention their ability to provide the very best care for their patients. In the general population, high-pressure companies account for our healthcare expenses that are nearly 50% greater than other organizations. The American Psychological Association estimates that more than $500 billion is siphoned from the U.S. economy as a result of workplace stress, and 55 million workdays are lost each year due to stress on the job. 60 to 80% of workplace accidents are attributed to stress, and it is estimated that more than 80% of doctor visits are due to stress. Workplace stress is directly linked to healthcare problems. It can range from metabolic syndrome to cardiovascular disease or even mortality. Nowhere has that been more evident than with healthcare professionals and those we've come to think of as our frontline heroes. The case for nurturing the nurturer. While most patients stay in the hospital for a limited period of time, the healthcare staff are present day and night. Employee retention can be positively or negatively influenced by staff well-being. Against global landscape where talent retention affects every industry, healthcare employers must struggle to minimize turnover costs and protect the organization's bottom line. The reasons for staff burnout could be low morale, absence of a career path, financial insecurity, and lack of commitment to the organization. Employees typically burn out or exhaust their physical or emotional strength when there are prolonged periods of stress or frustration. Burnout is not just a term for being overworked, rather is a measurable condition that takes on a heavy personal toll on healthcare providers. It can lead to lower quality of care and even increased errors. The work environment itself, along with the lack of support or resources and overall job stress, can be tapped as a primary contributor to that burnout. We need to give spaces for staff in the prime real estate. This will certainly go a long way to boost morale and even give them a pride of place. In addition to personal well-being and stress, the physical work environment is a critical factor. It is their safety and trust that they place in the organizations that they work in. The care community is tasked with an unending job to make sure that there are no obstructions to clinical care at any stage. The patient well-being is directly associated with the capability and efficiency of the healthcare staff. Design plays a critical role in influencing overall productivity and employee health, safety, and efficiency. What a patient and family typically remember most is the staff that care for them during their stay. So with a high turnover rate and retention numbers decreasing, how has the COVID pandemic impacted the healthcare industry? At the front line of the COVID pandemic is stress and emotional well-being of the nurses and staff has become dire. The healthcare professional can experience various psychological problems when working in high-pressure, high-risk scenarios. One of the most common is compassion fatigue, which is when nurses develop declining empathetic ability from repeated exposure to one's suffering. Compassion fatigue and its related symptoms are a particular issue for critical care nurses in times of disaster because the expectation to confront and cope with the need for care can exceed the ability to provide it. This can lead to emotional distress in staff. In addition to experiencing patient suffering and death more frequently, the staff also has responsibilities for decisions related to resource rationing. This leaves our caregiver at heightened risk of developing emotional and physical suffering. So, compassion fatigue is combined with a secondary trauma, and these are in 4 different categories. It can be cognitive, behavioral, emotional, and physical. For cognitive, there's lower concentration or rigid thinking. Behavioral could be withdrawal or appetite changes. Emotional could be guilt, anger, sadness, a feeling of failure. And physical, they could see it as increased heart rate, a lack of energy. From early studies showing the impact of COVID, we have seen that these symptoms have caused a 23% higher suicide rate, a 59% higher burnout rate, relational stress, increased depression, and increased staff turnover. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, employment projections from 2016 through 2026, registered nursing is among the top occupations in terms of job growth through 2026. So even before the COVID pandemic, the RN workforce was expected to grow from 2.9 million in 2016 to 3.4 million in 2026. And this is an increase of 15%. The increase is attributed to nurses' roles, responsibilities, and education that are evolving to meet the needs of an aging, increasing diverse population and to react to a complex, evolving healthcare system. They also project that an additional 203,700 new RNs each year through 2026 to both fill newly created positions and to replace retiring nurses. This large segment of the population, or baby boomers, ages start to grow to use more medical care. This may predict this with increasing burden and stress the healthcare industry. Included in this aging and retiring populations are nurses themselves. They indicate by research that by 2030, 1 million nurses will retire. This is due to retirement that is projected to occur at precisely the worst time. The nursing shortage will be at its height just as a large population segment will begin to retire.
So knowing that there is this really profound growth, as Michelle discussed, if nurses are to choose to remain in the profession and patients are to receive adequate care, facilities really do need to find new and innovative ways to manage their workforce, kind of to provide incentives to get people to stay or even to join to begin with. Again, in this healthcare market where employment equals profound growth, shouldn't a good working environment be the very top priority? Many of us work in corporate America. In recent years, we've seen this huge growth of movement around workplace wellness. It's something that we hear about all the time. There have been so many studies that have been done that show that daylighting, air quality, biophilia, bringing nature and natural forms into the workplace not only reduce stress, but also increase productivity. This is something that we hear about all the time. And these themes seem to be, really common in patient spaces, lobbies, public areas, things like that in healthcare design, but it's not something that we've really seen as a high priority in staff-specific spaces. We've found that hospital design really does focus a lot on enhancing the patient experience, as it absolutely should. But the patient experience we know is also enhanced when the caregivers are at the best. So this equation we're showing on the screen of good design equals good medicine really needs to start extending to caring for the caregivers, not only in patient-facing areas, but in spaces that are really unseen by everyone except for those who work there. As we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we learned that these spaces have been really undervalued because they don't generate revenue, because there's not enough room. I mean, so many reasons, but, we'll start to make an argument for these spaces. They really are areas that can generate revenue because they prevent turnover and burnout. So at the end of the day, keep hospitals from spending money. So if good design really does equal good medicine, we can really start making a case for design as a game changer. So, designers and engineers can start creating these really unique amenity spaces that are different from the clinical setting. These spaces will start to engage staff, provide communities that celebrate teamwork. They can encourage recruitment and retainment. These spaces only cater to healthcare professionals. They're separate from any visitor or patient spaces, and they'll start to provide reprieve and alleviate stressful conditions. In this way, any negativity or stress isn't brought to the patient, and the patient is able to receive the top quality of care. When we were talking about this topic with some of our colleagues, they mentioned the movie that recently came out, Hidden Figures, about three African American women mathematicians who worked for NASA, and how there was this one scene where this one woman would have to go so far away to reach a restroom. It was time during segregation, so it was actually in a separate building, but she was ultimately unable to do her work because she spent so much time away from her desk to be able to just use the restroom. So, we kind of see a similar thing with healthcare professionals because they spend so much time, caring for patients. They don't often have times to take a break, but when they do, we should make them accessible and easy to get to, and really there for staff to use on a regular basis. Okay, so we've all seen spaces like these break rooms and admin spaces that really do feel like more back of house, potentially created with a leftover space, maybe an old storage room or an office, had a fridge and a couple tables and chairs put into it. We know that facilities are definitely face a lot of challenges, either with cost or space. But we do feel like, there is an opportunity to upgrade these spaces a little bit to, give them access to daylight, to locate them strategically within the footprint of the building to create a more inspiring staff area. So, in the next couple of slides, we'll start showing examples of spaces that we think could be, start to improve what we typically see. Through our project work and research, we found that some of the most successful amenity spaces for healthcare professionals include cafes, break rooms, wellness rooms, staff lounges, and then smaller staff nourishment spaces that are closer to the working space, again, to reduce the number of steps you have to take a break. So we'll go through 4 different categories. The first are spaces that have access to nature and daylight. The next are spaces that alleviate stress. Then areas dedicated to collaboration to support teamwork and efficiency. And then lastly, spaces that offer access to the outdoors.
So as Kate mentioned, one of the most successful ways to celebrate staff is by giving them access to daylight. We know that a lack of sunlight is a direct contributor to depression, fatigue, weight gain, and changes in sleep pattern. With the discovery of seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, in the early 1980s, it was determined that daylight triggers production of melatonin, which plays a critical role in maintaining circadian rhythm. Research suggests that the factors such as shift length, shift change over time, and number of consecutive days' work raise an individual's risk of suffering SAD. This is especially prevalent in a healthcare setting where their shifts can last from 8.5 to 12.5 hours. And this impacts the worker's awareness of time, day, and current weather, all factors that are required to keep internal rhythms in balance. We as humans also have an innate desire to seek connections with nature. Workspaces that welcome daylight and allow views to the outdoors provide a healthier environment for employee concentration, focus, and overall happiness. So in this slide, you'll see that one beautiful window at the end of the corridor and our recently completed UVA hospital. So this is a quote from Dr. Reardon at UVA Medical Hospital. He's Associate Professor of Emergency Medicine. He said, as we wrap up the night shift and the sun begins to come up, it feels like the mood of the entire ED lightens. That window, the daylight, the views outside just bring a sense of newness to the day, and everyone's mood just picks up a little bit. When designing the ED, the question came up several times if we should enclose that window at the back, because there were concerns about being short on storage in their current state, but we were able to hang on to it and it really paid off. Designers are increasingly providing a direct connection to nature with access to natural light. Some ways we can do that are by clear story windows that maintain privacy and transparent glass in public areas. So in the top photos, you'll see a clear story window in a behavioral health room that gives the patient who's there for a longer stay access to daylight, but also some privacy so that people can't see into the rooms. On the image on the left, there's a larger expanse of clear story windows in a patient exam room. Again, the full height doors to the corridor allows the light to pass through and even provides some extra daylight to the team stations adjacent. And then in the other photo on the right, this is the sterile corridor. So after a long operation, the providers can come out and experience a little bit of respite after being inside for so long. This is the Medical University of South Carolina, the Shawn Jenkins Children's Hospital. The top image is of the waiting area near registration, where both the patients and staff benefit from large expanses of views and gorgeous landscapes. The bottom image is the same registration area with a light scheme of finishes and which enables daylight to reach further into the space. And the side image is the team station, which is purposely oriented to face the outside doors. This provides a line of sight, but also enables the staff to benefit from the natural light and views of the outdoors. The blue soffit above the door mimics the sky, continuing the theme of the importance of nature. When natural daylight is not possible, utilizing ambient lighting strategies that mimic daylight and support circadian rhythm is critical. There are new technology offerings that simulate daylight sequences like sunrise through sunset, as well as color variations to reflect different weather conditions. The top image is the Colox optical system, which is essentially a reproduction of natural light and the visual appearance of the sun and sky. The artificial light supports the body's natural circadian rhythm. We've recent requests to add these fixtures to both imaging rooms as well as exam rooms in the ED to support the geriatric population. The bottom image is a sky dome, which is designed to make a statement and create a more comfortable environment for those who live, work, and study under them. The organic shape provides warmth to the space, and the diffused lighting is not too harsh for those in stretchers looking towards the ceiling. Finally, the side image is an imaging room with LED color-changing lighting on the ceiling. This is a more cost-effective option compared to the Colox and enables the patients or staff to pick soothing colors.
So in tandem with the importance of the access to daylight, we know that there's this hierarchy of human needs that really must be met in order to achieve significance, contribute to society, and grow. All these things must be met first and foremost, this really basic level of human needs. You all probably remember learning in your early psychology classes in high school or college, learning about Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. There's this set of needs: food, warmth, water, rest, as well as safety, that must first be satisfied before an individual can really achieve anything. And then from there, psychological needs like belonging, love, esteem, things like that must be nurtured to let a person achieve their fullest potential. This is something that my husband talks about all the time. He's an elementary school teacher, something that his really young students need, but it does make me wonder, why should that attention to receiving these very basic necessities halt once we enter the professional world? I think sometimes it's assumed that these needs will be met, but that's not always the case, especially in professions like this. So from a design standpoint, typical amenity spaces, must support staff needs effectively so that they can participate fully in maximizing the quality of patient care. Spaces dedicated to food service and meal breaks create a place for staff to recharge and nourish their bodies, while also providing a sense of place and community and belonging. We know that staff have very limited time for breaks, sometimes really no time at all. So on-site accessibility to a variety of dining options is really key to keeping employees satisfied, healthy, and productive. A new dietary space, which is the image on the left, currently under construction at Lancaster General Health, promotes the sense of belonging that often happens around the table through a variety of dining experiences. The rendering here just shows one example of a kiosk, but there's many throughout the floor with different dining experiences. And then there's a lovely terrace where you can see the daylighting coming through in the left of the image where staff can go outside. Not only will the space provide staff and visitors choice and autonomy during a potentially stressful day, it will also have access to daylight and be open to the public to build community and provide more of a hospitality experience under that healthcare umbrella. And then the images on the lower right are a break room at the recently built University of Virginia Hospital in Charlottesville. The staff break room design in the past has been described as low priority and back of house, as we've discussed, often secondary in budget and design considerations to public facing or patient care areas. Instead, this UVA break room was designed with quite the opposite intent. It almost feels like it's out of a corporate interior setting. We really do think that the break room must be considered the anteroom to the clinical setting. With attention to respite, recharge, and self-care, staff are really better equipped to provide optimal patient treatment. In this case, using inspiring and even prime real estate spaces within the building with desirable views is what we've done here. You can see the views out to the mountains, onto the green roof. They really start to offer reprieve to staff who work tirelessly caring for others. You can also incorporate strategies like playful lighting, lounge-style seating, standard height tables and stools, or even booths, which are certainly a departure from the clinical setting and can foster interactions that build trust and a sense of belonging and esteem. Even the detailing in that image in the lower right corner is very different from what you see in the clinical setting. Staff are used to walls of crash rails, corner guards, patient vital monitors everywhere that are obviously incredibly necessary, but it's nice to give staff a break visually from what they're dealing with in their actual work. And then when it's possible, we've talked about reducing the number of steps traveled. So having adjacent lockers and shower rooms can really start to do that while providing, these really nice rejuvenating spaces for staff. And then likewise, with limited time for full breaks, providing little areas or alcoves that staff can use even closer to the clinical areas so that these nurturers can grab a quick bite or drink or snack throughout a shift really start to reduce the amount of burnout. And then at a more intimate level, wellness rooms like the one on the upper right corner, we've seen requests for these becoming more common, driven in part by laws that require employers to provide private spaces for nursing mothers. But we've also seen it as a request from the clinical staff and users just to have a space to, take a moment if you have to take medication or have a headache or, have a private conversation. These wellness rooms can really be flexible. And we found that, having just kind of your basic millwork, a sink, different seating options can really support that flexibility for different types of uses.
The next type of space we'll dive into are collaborative team spaces. While on break and nourishment opportunities adjacent to clinical staff allow for personal care and a stronger work culture, the team station is also key to effective collaboration and teamwork among staff. We need to provide flexible work posture options, allowing staff who are constantly on their feet to adapt to workspace to support their bodies. So, to do that, we need to provide essential team design that can balance patient comfort, privacy, and visibility by providing stand-up nurses stations, sit-down desks, and enclosed areas for private conversations. An enclosed team room within the station equipped with conference tables and built-in workstations for focused work and team huddles can offer additional staff support that is offstage. And when we say staff offstage, we mean out of the view of patients and visitors. Inova Mount Vernon successfully implements this strategy with places for curbside step-in and immersive work styles. And that's diagrammed on the left of this page. So the team area is in yellow, the medication and nourishment areas are in purple, and then the nurse stations are in green. And this slide shows a little bit more of the team station diagrams that focus on the organizations of the areas. And so the work styles we wanted to highlight are curbside collaboration areas in the light purple where staff can easily communicate with those who are passing by. The step-in style collaboration areas on the other side of the corridor for more involved work, with medium height panels to provide some visual and acoustic privacy. And then lastly, there are immersive style collaboration areas in yellow that are enclosed for concentrated work or already planned meetings. These are some more examples of collaborative team spaces. So in the top, we have a West Virginia outpatient facility, and that's showing stand-up touchdown workstations that are offstage in the staff corridor. And we pair these standing options with seating options that are by the windows to provide some daylight and views. The bottom image is UVA, which we've talked about earlier, and it's showing the team station with full height glass that has a gradient for privacy, but still allows visual access to the patients and families. And then the image on the side shows full height walls in the behavioral health team station. And the full height walls are important for both for security to the staff and also allows them visual access to the patients to ensure that they are being safe as well. And earlier we saw interior views of these exam rooms, but this is the corridor view, and it showcases how the daylight from those clear story windows does make it all the way to the corridors and allows some daylighting to the staff.
So in addition to creating inspiring team spaces with visual access to daylight, we really do also think that physical access to the outdoors is important. Getting that fresh air, being in the sunshine with the trees can really help improve, your ability to work after recharging. So these spaces can include areas that really allow you to gather and provide a sense of a community, even to enable mentoring and provide respite that's both solitary and shared. So it's really nice when these outdoor spaces are flexible for different types of relaxation or gathering. Providing a place to eat, nap, work out, even a place to grieve together because of the kind of work that they're doing is so important. And then, from a business side, the right environment does also tell employees that you are committed to their success and well-being, and in return, you want them to thrive for your company. So this image here is at Johns Hopkins. It's a very meditative garden that's accessible to staff, but also visitors as well. And it really does have this really relaxing, almost spa-like feel with the fountain and the trickling water and beautiful trees. It provides a completely different environment to what you have in the clinical setting. And then we have a few more examples of different types of access to the outdoors. All these images on this slide are Duke Medical Pavilion. These are, again, outdoor spaces that are accessible to both visitors and staff. And we like showing this because it does have a variety of different seating options. With the image on the left, you can see that we're using site walls as a place to perch and have a quick break, while the image on the lower right shows a larger covered group meeting space that allows staff to physically get out of the clinical setting and touch base and regroup, but also recharge at the same time. One of the benefits we also see to having these accessible outdoor spaces is that you also get beautiful views from the inside of the building. Being able to look out on these lovely terrace areas with plantings and interesting lighting can have a huge benefit versus just looking out onto a hard surface. Another type of outdoor space are roof gardens. So this is Children's National Healing Garden in Washington, D.C. It's located on the third floor of the Children's Medical Center. It's a rooftop garden terrace that really is a place of respite from the clinical setting for patients of all ages, their families, and then also the staff. The garden features walking paths, play-friendly surfaces, benches, and regional plants, and then also a maze for meditation and even play. So, it's very flexible in its function. And then there is a water feature. So, that sound of water running can be very relaxing as well. The design is fairly simple. It really is a beautiful space that has a huge design impact. And then, sometimes access to outdoors is even further reaching than the building. So this is Warren Memorial Hospital that's currently under construction in Front Royal, Virginia. So This particular hospital does have a really lovely outdoor terrace at the axis of the building where these two blocks come together. But we know that not every building has the opportunity for roof gardens or outdoor terraces. So there might be an opportunity to look outward to connect staff to nature. So in this case, these wooded walking paths around the site provide really gorgeous mountain views and a chance to exercise and recharge. It starts to become a place for the community to gather. So you're not just coming to the hospital because you're sick. Again, you're coming because you want to explore the site and exercise and spend time with other people or time alone. The hospital really does start to become a destination. And then this is MUSC, the Medical University of South Carolina, the Sean Jenkins Hospital that Michelle discussed when she was walking through team stations. This hospital is located in Charleston, South Carolina. So Michelle was speaking about these collaborative team spaces, and this project has been really applauded for the thought that went into providing staff members really great spaces to work and relax throughout the project. But this space in particular has received a lot of applaud. It's a rooftop garden that's just dedicated to staff. So many of the design solutions in the project grew out of the MUSC clinical leadership's ability to articulate challenges and dreams. This issue of solving staff emotional burnout was introduced to the design team, which we thought was really great, that they were talking about this problem and wanting to find a solution to fix it. So while the team was imagining a child life roof play deck, the design team heard a request for a small area dedicated just to staff to find respite outdoors. Unfortunately, the roof for the child play area did not have adequate space to accommodate also a staff area. So this idea was ultimately put on hold to prioritize space for the children and their families. But then one of the designers had this great idea. She said, hey, why don't we put it on top of the child roof play deck and create the staff respite on the floor above? And this respite deck is actually accessed, down a staff corridor, a separate staff elevator bank. So it really is off stage and separate from patient care spaces. It was truly this leftover in between space that has these gorgeous water views and beautiful, expansive views of the sky. The design team used wood decking and more residential feeling furniture. They also created a shaded seating area and a swing facing the water, which all contributes to this really rare and special amenity.
So now that we've covered different categories and examples of spaces that really support staff and discuss their impacts, why should healthcare organizations care? Strategies that prioritize staff comfort and can require budgets and physical spaces, which are often difficult to come by. But staff well-being is increasingly a crucial driver, and healthcare employers must struggle to minimize turnover costs and protect an organization's bottom line, as we've discussed earlier. A supported, healthy workforce increases the return on investment by increased productivity, decreased absenteeism, and reduced turnover. The improved culture and employee morale is an incentive to stay and an advertisement to new and talented staff to join the team. In a field where word of mouth, campus recruiting, internships, and mentorships are all considered recruiting tools, first impressions are impossible to dismiss. We've heard numerous accounts of nursing staff that knew as soon as they walked into a hospital if they wanted to work there or not. Spaces that communicate that staff are valued can be a key takeaway from the recruiting process. We discussed turnover costs at the beginning of this presentation. What if design could lead to a cost savings and improve the bottom line?
So to help kind of impress on ourselves and stakeholders how critical nurturing the nurturer can be from a cost perspective, we wanted to start to dive into what the actual numbers look like. So prioritizing employee well-being in healthcare design, we have found can have a really tangible impact on reducing the cost of employee turnover. So we talked about before how sometimes staff spaces are not considered revenue makers. This kind of makes a case for why they might be. So we've talked about how industry trends have been characterized by a really high turnover rate over the years. Since 2015, the average hospital has turned over a staggering 89% of its workforce. And this was pre-COVID. So we're kind of curious, where the numbers come in next year. We've learned that in 2019, hospitals did recognize that this is a big issue, and they aim to reduce turnover costs by 3%. And 3% doesn't sound like very much, but we'll see on the next slide that every percentage really does count. And while this 3% goal was not met, the turnover did drop by about 1% since 2018. And again, this is pre-COVID. But while the percentage rates of improvement really do seem small, the costs associated with the issue are quite enormous. We learned in recent studies that the average cost of turnover for a bedside nurse is over $40,000 and can actually go up to $56,000. We were pretty surprised by this number. This ends up being an average hospital losing up to $6.1 million per year. So you can see that every percentage change really does count. And in a sector where there is this increased demand for healthcare labor, this also means that staff have a greater choice in where they can work. So voluntary departure accounts for more than 90% of all hospital terminations. It's not necessarily because people are doing a bad job, so they get fired. It's actually because they just simply want to leave. We read a recent article by HealthStream, and they did a great job summarizing 7 common reasons for voluntary employee departure. They noted that as job options have increased, workers are just not tolerant of jobs that don't meet their expectations or that they just simply do not like. We learned that career development, compensation, and benefits, job characteristics, and management behavior are among those operational reasons why people choose to leave. But then there's also things like well-being, work-life balance, and work environment that are top drivers. So we really do think that paired with a culture shift, these things can be dramatically improved through design strategies that we just discussed. And while nearly all hospitals do now have retention initiatives, less than 40% have a formal retention strategy in place, which kind of surprised us. We thought, okay, like if the cost is so much, why isn't this a bigger priority for, having a tangible strategy to work towards? And with so much riding on this ability to recruit and retain top talent, we really think that architects, designers, and engineers can play a very influential role. So at the end of the day, whatever angle you take, whether you simply care for, the healthcare providers, you want them to have nice spaces, or because you care only about the bottom line and the numbers, it really is true that experience and workforce engagement are completely intertwined and can affect each other. So enhancing culture and well-being, providing spaces with areas to recharge and let staff care for themselves. At the end of the day, ultimately letting them know that they're valued and not back of house will in turn yield a better patient experience and save these organizations quite a bit of money. So some of you, maybe in your personal life, have filled out one of these forms in the upper right corner. It's a hospital scorecard noting satisfaction during your visit. So it asks questions like, do you feel like you were treated with respect? Do you feel like staff listened to you? Did they take the time to explain things? All of these, can be majorly affected if staff don't feel taken care of. If they're coming to the patient stressed and not feeling great personally, they might not take the time to listen and they might not take the time to explain things. And hospital scorecards are what, kind of compare hospitals to their competition. So they really are important in getting hospitals good scores. We really do think that this can correlate to broader organizational performance and net profit margins at the end of the day. So human-centered design, placing the nurture at an equal level of importance to the patient, we know it might not totally offset this incredible pressure, budgets constraints, space constraints, all these factors that organizations are forced to prioritize during the design process. We know it's really not that easy. But if nothing else, evidence of the effect of patient and staff experience on the bottom line should really start to command the attention of industry leaders and designers and architects and engineers to find new and innovative ways to nurture the nurturer. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate, you going through the presentation with us. We'd love to, take a few moments for any questions you might have. We'll post a recap here at the end just to, refresh you on all the sections we went through, and we're happy to circle back to any others if needed.